On April 19, 1973, an extraterrestrial landing unit departed from the moon and descended upon Earth, triggering a massive explosion. From that day forward, all of humanity was plunged into an all-out war against the alien creatures. The global population plummeted to just over 1 billion. These invaders from space, whose origins traced back to Earth itself, were known as Beta. To stand against them, mankind developed tactical surface fighters. In July 1988, the Beta launched their assault on Japan. In the blink of an eye, they had seized northern Kyushu and the Chugoku region. By August 15th, even the imperial capital of Kyoto had fallen. The front lines shifted eastward across Japan. On September 15th, First Lieutenant Kamaki Sayoko received orders to report to Sado Island, Japan, for a new mission. Kamaki walked alone toward the base. Her teammates for this operation were 2nd Lieutenant Murata Akiyoshi and 2nd Lieutenant Saito Mato. However, since she was the only one with real combat experience, the other two had to undergo training using tactical surface fighter simulators. In addition, 2nd Lieutenant Kusano was assigned as a support pilot for Kamaki. Kamaki changed out of her uniform, and as her eyes fell upon a photograph of herself with her old friends, tears welled up in her eyes. Under orders from squad leader Sakazaki Miyako, Kusano escorted Kamaki on a tour of the base. As they walked, he briefed her on the situation there. Sado served as a critical maritime defense line for Japan and had been fortified early on. Niigata now lay directly in the path of the Beta's advance. A company of deployed tactical surface fighters had been sent in for support. The two platoons that remained behind had also lost a considerable number of troops to the dispatched unit. That was why the base had to fill the gaps with fresh recruits still in training. Kusano himself had only arrived from Yokohama a week ago. If Niigata were to fall and mountainous regions like Gunma and Nagano ended up in Beta hands, the entire Kanto plain would be within range of the laser class. When that happened, both Yokohama and Tokyo would be in grave danger. They had to prevent that at all costs. That said, in Kamaki's former unit, half of her comrades never returned from their very first sortie. Kusano understood this all too well, yet he remained resolute in defending his homeland. Although a mandatory evacuation order had been issued, many people refused to leave the place where they had grown up. Moreover, this was the place where their deceased loved ones would return to, so a great number of them rejected the evacuation entirely. On September 24th, the Itoigawa defense line was breached. Sado Base Commander Takebana Masaki ordered his subordinates to assemble the tactical surface fighter platoons from the defensive strongpoints for reinforcement. At that moment, the surveillance system in the Sado Strait issued a warning. Shibata Base also transmitted a signal reporting that half a swarm of Beta had submerged into the water at Sakata, estimated to reach Sado by the following morning. Masaki immediately declared Emergency Condition 3 and swiftly gathered all units stationed at the strongpoints. The alarm sirens blared across the base. The deep water minefields had already been detonated to slow the enemy's advance, but the sheer number of enemies kept surging forward relentlessly. The Beta Vanguard, a brigade-sized swarm, had penetrated the first perimeter. The 2nd Fleet Shinano of the Imperial Navy, currently on patrol, confirmed the first target at a location 30 kilometers south-southwest of Mono Bay. The minefields helped them eliminate the first wave of Beta. Artillery and all tactical surface fighter platoons stood ready for launch. The Beta's rate of advance showed no sign of slowing, and they had breached the second perimeter. Everyone scrambled to prepare for battle. All artillery units aimed at the designated targets and initiated coordinated bombardment. Every soul there was determined to defend Sado. Wave after wave of Beta was annihilated, yet they kept charging forward without pause. The tactical surface fighters of Platoon A and Platoon B took turns sortying to clear out the destroyer class. They successfully cleared the area around the defensive wall. Although this strategy allowed them to manage for the time being, there were no reserve tactical surface fighter units left. Meanwhile, the reinforcements were still anchored offshore at Yamagata. At that moment, the base detected a new type of Beta appearing at point 5 and 606, where Platoon B was engaged in combat. Several tactical surface fighters had lost their signals. Platoon A had to rush to their aid immediately. Because the acoustic sensor system had been damaged in the initial attack and could not be restored in time, they had failed to detect the fort class. The Beta kept growing in number, but with fighting raging on the mainland as well, no reinforcements could be sent here. The Americans gave absolutely no response. Masaki feared that once the enemy deployed the laser class, it would all be over. Platoon B fell back. Drawing on her combat experience, Kamaki guided the entire platoon to fire 120mm rounds at the joints of the Fort-class Beta. Thanks to Kamaki's command, they successfully brought down one Fort-class. But behind it, many more Fort-class were advancing. Kamaki narrowly avoided a direct hit when Kusano pushed her out of the way just in time and managed to shoot down the Fort-class. But in doing so, he was crushed beneath it. The 7th wave of Beta was approaching, numbering up to 12,000. Platoon B had no tactical surface fighters left capable of launching. All civilians had been moved into the shelters. The Beta had also reached the defensive wall. Kusano was still alive, but unable to contact the outside, and Beta fluid was seeping in, corroding his body. The defensive wall had been breached. Beta poured inside in overwhelming numbers. Platoon A continued to fight with everything they had. The laser class had made it inside. All forces had to execute evasive maneuvers. More laser class were advancing from the coastline. With the remaining combat strength, humanity could hardly hold them back. The Beta shattered the walls of the shelter, and the people inside had no way to resist their onslaught. The waves of attack still showed no sign of stopping. Admiral Osawa Hisaya ordered the warships to cease fire, as the Beta had infiltrated the urban area and their fleet could no longer eliminate them. Kamaki was tasked with cooperating with the survivors of Platoon B to escort civilians to Ryotsu Port for evacuation. In the command room, Masaki and his aide remained behind. Kamaki discovered that only a single young girl had survived inside the shelter. The rescue convoy departed from the base. Kamaki fought off the Beta to ensure their safe passage. The naval fleets offshore also provided cover so she could lead the others to safety. At the port, the civilians quickly boarded the transport vessels before the next wave of Beta struck. Kamaki intended to return to the base to provide support once she confirmed all civilians had boarded. But Miyako stopped her. Miyako ordered Kamaki to face this tragic reality and keep on living. Kamaki broke down sobbing and refused to accept the order, so Miyako relieved her of duty, rendering her tactical surface fighter unable to fight any further. Miyako stayed behind alone to hold the base. The fleets did everything they could to help as well. Despite being urged to retreat, none of the command staff boarded the ships. The little girl rescued from the shelter was like a miracle amid this devastating war. A few days later, the Hokuriku region had fallen into Beta hands, and the combined death toll and number of missing persons across the entire empire reached 36 million. On Sato Island, Hive number 21 had been constructed by the Beta. 3 years had passed since the fall of Sato. In December 2001, humanity made the decision to abandon Earth. Alternative 5 dictated that 1 billion people would remain on Earth to continue fighting, while a select few, approximately 100,000, would emigrate to a planet beyond the solar system as planned. Shirogane Takeru jolted awake from his dream. He burst into tears when he realized he was in his very own room. He therefore believed that the abandonment of Earth had been nothing but a dream. But when he saw the ruins outside, he knew this was no dream. He had somehow returned to 2 months before Alternative 5 was set to launch. Takeru ran alone across a bridge, gazing down at the city below. He realized his memories were gradually fading. All he could recall was watching the last destroyer launch into the sky, and after that, nothing. But if this was real, then right around this very time, the emigration fleet was also being constructed. More than half of humanity would be left behind. He slammed his fist into a nearby tree in anger and resolved to go see someone. Following his fragmented memories, he ran to Yokohama base. The soldiers guarding the gate stopped him and demanded to see his permit and identification papers. Everything unfolded just as Takeru remembered, and he had none of those documents. Still, he insisted they let him see Professor Kuzuki Yuyuko. The guards contacted Yuyuko for her input. Unfortunately, she had no memory of him whatsoever. Despite being refused, Takeru stubbornly refused to leave. Seeing how obstinate he was, the guards had no choice but to restrain him by force. Takeru worried that if this continued, he might end up thrown in a cell. He knocked down one of the guards and shouted that they were going to lose the war. This caught Yuyuko's attention and brought her to him. Even so, she still had no recollection of ever having taught him. To quickly earn her trust, he brought up her research and Alternative 5. The guards moved to take him away, but Yuyuko stepped in and stopped them. Takeru was relieved, thinking he could finally talk to her. Instead, she had him placed in a machine and subjected to a decontamination process. Once the procedure was complete, Yuyuko brought Takeru to her office. She was curious to know where he had heard about the alternative plan. Takaru answered honestly that the first time he ever heard the term was on the night of December 24th, from Yuyuko herself. He also told her about how he had traveled back in time. Yuyuko wanted him to tell her more of his story. He held nothing back and recounted everything. Takaru was originally from a world without beta, where he was simply an ordinary student. One morning, he woke up and found himself in this world. When he went to school, he found a military base in its place, and the people he once knew were living entirely different lives. They both concluded that Takaru might have come from a parallel world. The two worlds had countless differences, the most significant being the beta. In this world, the war against the beta had raged on for 30 years, and humanity stood on the brink of annihilation. Though lost and displaced, Takaru became a military cadet and did his best to save this world. However, on December 24th, Alternative 5 was launched, and command authority was transferred to a new headquarters. Yokohama base was also absorbed. At that time, before Takaru could even learn what the alternative plan entailed, the final destroyer had already been launched. With time running critically short, Takaru urged Yuyuko to find a way to miniaturize 15 billion semiconductor parallel processing units down to the size of a palm. Takaru's goal was to cancel the launch of Alternative 5 and defeat the beta. But Yuyuko suspected Takaru was a spy for the anti-alternative faction. Yuyuko coldly pointed her gun at Takaru and demanded the truth. But Takaru knew that having only a little over 100,000 people flee into space while those left behind awaited annihilation was not what Yuyuko truly wanted. He also knew about how she drowned her sorrows in alcohol and wept over her own powerlessness. He shouted at her to act like the genius she was and do her job properly. He did not understand why he himself began to cry, as though he had lost something incredibly precious. After hearing Takaru out, Yuyuko realized they shared the same goal and lowered her gun, though she still did not fully trust him. Yuyuko handed him an access pass, expressing her wish for him to join Training Squad 207 of the Honor Guard. The enlistment procedures had already been completed by Yuyuko, and he would begin training the next day. On October 23rd, Takaru would undergo training to pilot a tactical surface fighter and battle the beta. There, he met Mitsurugi Maya. Squad B of Training Squad 207 was quickly assembled. Instructor Jinguji Morimo promptly introduced Takaru to the group. The squad consisted of 4 female members, with Sakaki Chizuru serving as squad leader. The other members were Mitsurugi Maya, Ayamine Kei, and Tamase Miki. There was also Yoroi Mikoto, who was currently hospitalized. The official training program commenced. Takaru was ordered to gear up fully and begin the march. Even as he trained, Takaru kept thinking about how to make Alternative 4 succeed. So when Morimo called on him to answer, he was caught completely off guard. Despite that, he managed to give a remarkably articulate response. His answer left all his squadmates astonished. After class, everyone gathered together to talk. An upcoming comprehensive combat technique evaluation was approaching, and passing it would grant them the chance to train with actual tactical surface fighters. So failure was absolutely not an option. Every one of them burned with determination. Takaru also steeled himself to complete training and become a member of the Honor Guard as soon as possible, in order to earn Yuyuko's trust and support her plan. Although he did not fully understand what Alternative 4 entailed, he still wanted to make it succeed in order to prevent Alternative 5 from being launched. When he first arrived in this world, all Takaru wanted was to leave this wrong world and return to his own. But before he knew it, his heart had changed, and he found himself wanting to fight with everything he had to protect this world. Although Yuyuko never said it outright, she too was deeply hoping he would become someone of significance who could help her. On his way back, Takaru could not stop thinking about Yuyuko's question. That evening, Takaru encountered Maya on the training grounds. Every night, she would train here so she could become a member of the Honor Guard as soon as possible and stand on the battlefield to protect this planet and its people. In his previous world, Maya had taught Takaru what it truly meant to have a homeland. And now, upon returning to this world, what Takaru wanted to protect was this Earth and all of humanity upon it. The two of them sat down together in silence, gazing up at the night sky. During humanity's Operation Lucifer, a beta nest unexpectedly detonated. Bravo leader descended to investigate. In the center of the cave, they spotted what appeared to be small columns stretching straight from the ground to the ceiling, along with a transparent section at the core. When Bravo leader zoomed in to maximum magnification for a closer look, they discovered it was a human brain. On October 24th, Takaru was practicing firearm assembly. and his completion time surpassed K's previous record. This spurred everyone to train even harder. Takeru told the group that he had something he needed to protect at all costs, which was why he had given up his military service exemption to come here. To defeat the Beta, it was absolutely essential for people with strong wills and fierce determination to come together and join forces. That was exactly what everyone had taught Takeru. They resolved to give their all together to complete their training. Takeru used the pass he had been issued to visit Kasumi. The moment she saw him, Kasumi ran and hid behind a cabinet, peeking at him shyly. Takeru gently approached and greeted her. They shook hands as a way of commemorating their first meeting. Afterward, Takeru and Kasumi went to Yuyuko's office. Kasumi ran over and whispered something to Yuyuko, which piqued Takeru's curiosity. Takeru asked Yuyuko about Sumika's disappearance. Yuyuko had investigated and found that Sumika did not exist in this world. And yet, Takeru could sense Sumika's presence through Kasumi, because the only person who ever called him Takeru-chan was Sumika. Yuyuko revealed that Kasumi was one of the key elements of Alternative 4, and the brain-like object housed in the cylindrical column they had found was paired with Kasumi. According to Yuyuko, Alternative 4 was a plan to have a child bestow dreams and hope upon humanity. That child was Kasumi. Although she trusted Takeru, Yuyuko could not disclose anything further about the plan. The next day it rained heavily, but they still had to train as usual. Everything unfolded exactly as Takeru remembered. Since arriving in this world, Takeru's condition had changed considerably. Yuyuko concluded that it did not really matter whether Takeru possessed memories of this world's future. There was more than one path to the goal. Insignificant differences would have no real impact. What Yuyuko truly wanted to know was why, among the countless parallel worlds, Takeru had returned to one nearly identical to his own. There was only one possible explanation: Takeru's overwhelming desire. If this hypothesis was correct, then because Takeru had crossed into another world, complications could arise that threatened the lives of both Takeru and those connected to him. Therefore, he had to join forces with others to achieve their objective in this world. Takeru's squadmates were all brimming with enthusiasm, eager to pass the comprehensive combat skills evaluation and earn the right to pilot tactical surface fighters. While Takeru was walking down the corridor, Makoto suddenly crashed into him, sending them both tumbling. The date was now November 1st, and only a little over a month remained before Alternative 5 would be launched. A week later, as though suddenly remembering something, Takeru rushed to report to Yuyuko. The Beta would launch an amphibious assault on the mainland from Sato Island. On November 11th, a group of Beta that landed on the mainland would break through the Imperial Army's battle lines and vanish for a period of time. Before long, they would regroup and breach the second line of defense. The Beta would move southward along the absolute defense line of northern Kanto. They would then change course through Nagano, Gunma, and Niigata prefectures. The Imperial Army would manage to prevent the absolute defense line from being pierced. If the Imperial forces were defeated, it would create an opening for the Beta to penetrate the absolute defense line. By that point, the military would have analyzed the Beta's objective, and the Imperial Army would take them down. Takeru urged them to strike the Beta right at the Niigata coastline. However, since Takeru's information had absolutely no basis, Yuyuko wanted to wait and see whether events would unfold as he described. Takeru was furious because waiting meant many people would die. But Yuyuko saw it as the necessary price for Takeru to prove his claims. Takeru could not simply stand by and watch so many people perish. Moved by Takeru's desperate plea, Yuyuko finally agreed to trust what he said. Time quickly arrived at the date Takeru had predicted. Sure enough, they detected a Beta swarm originating from the hive on Sato Island, and everything played out exactly as Takeru had described. Because the military had been forewarned by Yuyuko this time, they were fully prepared, and the Beta were swiftly annihilated. In contrast to Takeru's elation, Yuyuko remained deep in thought with a troubled expression. They resumed their training. After this incident, Takeru became even more determined to change the course of history and make Alternative 4 succeed. As a reward for their hard work, Morimo granted them a week of rest on a southern island. Upon arrival, however, they were met with exercises that were anything but easy. Although Takeru had known what was coming, it still took everything he had to push through the challenges alongside his squadmates and reach the rally point. They successfully passed this round of evaluation exercises. Everyone was overjoyed, for they had now earned the qualification to pilot tactical surface fighters. Takeru's conviction grew even stronger that together they could change the world. The members of Squad 207 enjoyed a rare stretch of peaceful days, resting together by the beach before the storm arrived. On November 23, Squad 207 began combat training on tactical surface fighters. Takeru completed the movement pattern D drill in just one day, which made Marimo somewhat suspicious about his claim of having no prior experience piloting a tactical surface fighter. According to records, the fastest any cadet had ever completed this drill was 5 days. Takeru boldly suggested that Marimo share his operational logs with everyone for reference. Yuyuko had previously made the same proposal. Based on Yuyuko's suggestion, the current training curriculum was being significantly revised. From now until Squad 207's graduation, they would be given priority access to the simulators. They were also provided with specialized training machines to familiarize themselves. Takeru was thrilled to see the Fubuki assigned during this period, which proved that the timeline had been shortened. Takeru gave Kasumi a seashell and showed her how to hold it up to her ear to hear the sound of ocean waves. At that moment, Yuyuko suddenly appeared looking deeply displeased and told Takeru to come with her. The next day, the Fubuki tactical surface fighter arrived as expected. In addition, there was also the Takemikazuchi, a custom-built machine exclusively made by the Imperial Royal Guard under the Ministry of the Imperial Household, designated specifically for Maya. Just then, Tsukayomi Mana arrived leading a group of attendants who formally bowed before Maya. Mana had received orders to deliver this Takemikazuchi to Maya. However, Maya did not seem particularly enthusiastic about this special treatment. Mana could not understand how someone who was supposed to be dead, like Takeru, could be here. She also accused him of having falsified the United Nations military database to infiltrate this place. Mana further warned Takeru to stay away from Maya. After returning, Takeru could not stop thinking about what Mana had said. It meant that the version of Takeru native to this world had once existed and had died. On November 25th, Squad 207 was interrogated by their superiors about the appearance of the Takemikazuchi, but they refused to answer. Because Takeru had stepped forward to argue back, he was struck. Yet he showed no fear and stood his ground against them. Mana also brought members of the Royal Guard to confront the United Nations military for committing such a disgraceful act in broad daylight. The UN forces tried to dismiss it as an internal matter, but Mana gave them a tongue lashing they would not soon forget. Afterward, Takeru was summoned to Marimo's office to face consequences for what had happened. However, this time the higher-ups decided not to pursue the matter. This was First Lieutenant Mana's ruling. Marimo also reminded Takeru to be grateful to his squad mates, as they had done their best to stand up for him. Marimo even asked with concern about Takeru's injuries. On November 26th, Takeru also completed the movement pattern F drill without any trouble. With the Fubuki, its mobility and handling were far superior to the Gekishin in every way. Takeru wished the controls could be more like a video game, allowing him to perform cancels and combos intuitively, or perhaps use special command inputs to override the autopilot. For instance, Takeru suddenly recalled how, back in his old world, he used to play team-based games with his friends. They had coordinated with each other remarkably well. That thought sparked an idea, and he immediately brought it to Yuyuko. He proposed applying the Valjourn system to the tactical surface fighters, which would make them easier for everyone to operate. He was thinking about evasive maneuver cancels and combo inputs. Normally, when a tactical surface fighter was about to fall, it would automatically enter a defensive stance. Once the defensive sequence initiated, no manual control was possible. A cancel would override that. While it would leave the tactical surface fighter without its defensive posture, it would allow the pilot to fire even while falling. As for combos, executing certain specific maneuvers within a set time window would trigger actions different from the standard ones, similar to chaining special moves together. Yuyuko roughly grasped what Takeru was getting at. First, simplifying operations. Second, standardizing control trajectories into templates. Takeru believed that if they could convert stored maneuver data and let him set up the combos, it would be entirely feasible. Yuyuko then pointed out the flaw in this plan. The enemy would not always behave the same way, and Takeru could not possibly create enough templates to cover every possible scenario. Takeru suggested creating a few generalized maneuvers and leaving all the decision-making to the computer. But Yuyuko objected, arguing that if they did that, there would be no need for human pilots at all. Takeru finally understood that no matter how diverse the templates were, machines still needed to be placed in specific situations to make decisions. Takeru sighed in frustration, thinking he had come up with a brilliant idea. but Yuyuko actually wanted to test it out. The core of this problem was enhancing the tactical surface fighter's autonomous processing capability. Without delay, Yuyuko began making adjustments on her computer. From now on, they would use Takeru's training machine for verification testing and continuous data collection. Starting today, Takeru would become a test pilot to validate this new concept. On November 27th, Kasumi came to wake Takeru and gave him a present. Inside was a drawing of a game guy, an object that did not exist in this world. When Takeru turned to ask her about it, Kasumi had already disappeared. At the end of class that day, Morimo announced that the United Nations Under-Secretary of Internal Affairs would be arriving tomorrow to inspect their base. Originally, the schedule was supposed to proceed gradually starting tomorrow, and they had planned a simulated urban combat exercise in the Old Town district. But the higher-ups had accelerated the timeline. This did not match Takeru's memories, because previously the Undersecretary's inspection took place after the urban exercise. The fact that the Undersecretary was arriving at the base now meant the HSST was going to fall. Takeru rushed to report this to Yuyuko, but her reaction was surprisingly indifferent. Takeru was extremely anxious because even a slight delay in response could result in the entire Yokohama base being blown away. History had only just begun to change slightly, but if the upcoming event were altered, the future would shift dramatically. Therefore, Yuyuko absolutely forbade Takeru from intervening. At this point, there was less than a month before Alternative 5 would be launched. Feeling powerless, Yuyuko could only agree with Takeru to handle the imminent situation. The faction pushing Alternative 5 had probably been waiting eagerly for things to deteriorate. It was also possible they had already steeled themselves to sacrifice everything for an assault on Kashgar. This was the very first place the beta had landed on Earth. The areas displayed on the screen showed the locations of various hives. In Japan, the beta had two bases. One was on Sato Island. Before the operation to reclaim the main island, Yokohama base itself had once been beta territory. Some of the facilities constructed by the beta were still operational, which was why the readings had not vanished. It was at this moment that Takeru realized the base they were living in was actually a hive, a beta nest. Takeru sat dazed beneath a tree, staring out at the ruined city. His mind could not stop dwelling on the fact that the place where everyone had been living so casually was once a beta nest. In the classroom, Miki was crying inconsolably because she had written a letter to her father, the Undersecretary of Internal Affairs, telling him she was the squad leader, just wanting to make him a little proud. But now it had caused an irreversible situation, and so they devised a plan for Miki to be squad leader for a day. The United Nations Undersecretary of Internal Affairs arrived as scheduled. Everyone followed the plan and let Miki act as squad leader. Miki was given the task of escorting her father on a tour of the base. Her father was overjoyed to see how much his daughter had grown. Although the others found it somewhat annoying to take orders from Miki, they still played along. He even expressed his wish to entrust Miki to Takeru's care, and while he was at it, hinted at wanting a grandchild to carry on the Tame's family name. The others, upon hearing this, immediately tied Takeru up and dragged him away under the pretense of preparing for the reception. When Takeru woke up, it was already dark. His face was bruised and swollen, and he had been dumped in the restroom with only Kasumi there cleaning up. Yuyuko had handled the HSST incident cleanly. Through this experience, Takeru learned that several people in his squad carried the bloodlines of some very complicated figures. Today they continued collecting data for the new research. Yuyuko had made slight modifications to the action sequence settings. The other members of the squad watched the research process on screen. They were amazed by Takeru's fluid movements while piloting the tactical surface fighter. Yuyuko decided to use this data to create a test version in time for the mock battle the next day. Kasumi had also contributed to this success, so when Takeru saw her, he went over to thank her. But when he asked her about the drawing of the game console, she gave no answer and ran off. Takeru then chased after Yuyuko to ask her to install the new OS into Chizuru's and Kei's machines, which would cut 5 days off their training. Yuyuko did not object, as she considered it merely a small diversion from her alternative for research. But when Takeru pressed for more details about that research, she angrily threw him out. This was the second time Takeru had seen Yuyuko like this. The first was in the previous world, when Alternative 4 had failed and Yuyuko had fallen into despair and hopelessness. Yuyuko furiously swept all the documents off her desk. Takeru bent down to pick them up, realizing he had been too hasty. Then he suddenly remembered that in the previous world, Yuyuko had marked an X on a certain formula and then abruptly began writing out a strange equation. These words were like a revelation for Yuyuko. She urgently asked Takeru to recall the formula he had seen, even if only a fragment. But when Takeru had seen that formula, he had no idea what it meant, so he could not remember it. In any case, since Yuyuko was the one who had originally devised it, she would try to recreate it herself. Takeru's thoughts drifted to Sumika. Back then, Sumika had stood crying under a tree, waiting endlessly for Santa Claus. So Takeru had given her a prize he had won from a game. Sumika had been so happy. When he came to, Takeru found Kasumi standing beside his bed. But the moment she noticed he was awake, she darted away. Early on the morning of November 29th, Maya had already gone to the gymnasium to train. She remained deeply curious about the movements of the tactical surface fighter under Takeru's control. Yuyuko had stayed up all night working on the new formula. She could not even remember when she had last slept. Today was the day of the mock battle. The teams would be Chizuru, Kei, and Takeru against Mecha, Miki, and Makoto. Yuyuko took on the role of observing Chizuru's squad. Marimo found Yuyuko's involvement rather puzzling. Chizuru and Kei were anxious because they had only just learned that their tactical surface fighters would be running a new OS. Takeru reassured them that the basic operations were essentially the same as before. Kei still had some doubts about the effectiveness of the new OS. Yuyuko, on the other hand, was eagerly looking forward to seeing their astonished faces when they used it. To prove the superiority of the new OS, they absolutely had to win this time. Kei and Chizuru needed to adapt to the new OS quickly. Maya commanded Miki and Makoto to follow the plan they had prepared. Miki took up her position at the designated hiding spot. Makoto and Maya would pursue the opposing team. Takeru spotted them and executed a reverse encirclement. Chizuru and Kei closed in and coordinated to force the enemy tactical surface fighters onto the main road. Takeru provided support from behind. Takeru had anticipated that Miki would be sniping from a distance. Miki was waiting for her teammates to drive the enemy into her firing zone. But Takeru's group moved with far more agility than usual, so she still had not managed to land a hit. Having figured out Maya's team strategy, Takeru used it to pinpoint Miki's position without taking a single scratch. Takeru took on the task of suppressing Miki. The remaining two would be left to Chizuru and Kei. Unable to determine the enemy's position, Miki began to panic and fired wildly. This created an opening for Takeru to strike and take her down. Thanks to the new Oza's enhanced mobility, Kei also succeeded in eliminating Makoto. Now only Maya remained as Takeru's team's target. Even though Maya knew the other machines now had reaction speeds matching Takeru's, she showed no trace of fear. She believed that as long as she could predict their movements and actions in advance, anyone could still find a chance to win. Just as Maya thought she had Chizuru in her sights, Chizuru dodged with a spectacular evasive maneuver. The other members seized the opportunity to surround Maya. Unable to evade, Maya took fatal damage. Chizuru's squad claimed victory. Yuyuko was thoroughly pleased with the results. After returning to the staging area, Maya immediately asked Takeru about the fluid movements of the tactical surface fighters. Yuyuko stepped forward and explained that she had installed a new OS on Chizuru's team's machines. Even Marimo had known nothing about this beforehand. Seizing the opportunity, Yuyuko would now replace the OS across all of Squad 207's machines to gather more data samples. Squad 207 would become the development team for the next generation tactical surface fighter. Yuyuko had no intention of reporting this to the higher-ups, as it was connected to her own research. She would also upgrade the OS on the simulator systems so everyone could practice to their heart's content. Since the development of the system would now depend on Squad 207, Yuyuko had immense expectations for them. On his way back, Takeru caught a glimpse of Kasumi dashing past, so he headed to Yuyuko's office to look for her. But when he stepped inside, he encountered a stranger who already knew his name. The unfamiliar man walked up and pinched Takeru's cheek, marveling at how exquisitely crafted this imitation was. Confused, Takeru swatted his hand away. Kasumi, frightened by the man, grabbed onto Takeru's sleeve. The lights in the room flicked on as Yuyuko returned, visibly displeased that the man had entered her office without notice. The man calmly sat down and introduced himself as Yoroi Sakin from the 2nd Diplomatic Division of the Ministry of Information. Meanwhile, Makoto was lounging on the grass, keeping an eye on her bird trap. After a while, she managed to catch a bird. She planned to use it to supplement their meals, since synthetic food was hardly enough for a growing body like hers. By chance, she spotted K below, exchanging letters with an unidentifiable person. Sakin's visit this time concerned the XG-70 matter. The situation appeared to be growing unstable. Recently, a faction within the Imperial Army had been making troubling moves. They had established a strategic research council. If those people stirred up trouble, Japan would face a vacuum in both its political and military spheres. When that happened, some nation would surely act. The anti-alternative forces and other factions within the United Nations would not sit idle. Naturally, both the XG-70 project and Yuyuko's plan would be implicated. Sakin questioned how it was possible that such precise reinforcement orders had been issued during the beta landing just days earlier. He also wanted to know why Takeru, who was supposed to be dead, was standing right here. Sakin demanded an explanation from Takeru. Yuyuko, clearly unamused, told him to figure it out on his own. Knowing he would not extract the information he needed from anyone here, Sakin departed. That night, Takeru tossed and turned, unable to sleep. In the previous world, he had definitely never met Sakin. Could it be that history had changed? His thoughts wandered aimlessly until he drifted off without realizing it. In his dream, he saw Sumika once again. Takeru told Yuyuko about his recurring dreams of Sumika, and she agreed to help him investigate. Kasumi wheeled in a machine, and they began monitoring Takeru as he fell asleep. Once again, he dreamed of Sumika. Yuyuko's examination revealed that at certain points during Takeru's sleep, his brainwaves would vanish entirely while his body's vital responses remained. The only possible explanation was that during moments when Takeru's consciousness wavered, he was shifting between worlds. The cause was likely a disruption in the equilibrium between the two worlds. Through his own self-awareness and through being recognized by those around him, Takeru had anchored himself to this world. But in the original world, because the element known as Takeru had departed, stability had been lost. Therefore, the original world was pulling Takeru back whenever his consciousness weakened. If his desire to return to the original world intensified, his consciousness there would rise to the surface and replace his consciousness in this world. In that case, returning to the original world would be quite easy. Takeru briefly thought of the peaceful world he truly belonged to, but there were still things he needed to accomplish in this world, so he was not yet ready to go back. Yuyuko, however, believed Takeru needed to make a trip back to the original world to retrieve the formula she had once written there, which would complete the alternative 4 experiment and resolve the instability plaguing this world. Takeru understood the need to return to the original world to retrieve the formula that could save this one. What he could not understand was why Yuyuko was making him share a room with Kasumi. The next morning, he arrived at the cafeteria with Kasumi looking utterly exhausted. Kasumi even picked up food with her chopsticks and fed it to him, which ignited a blaze of fury among the others. They could not contain themselves and demanded Takeru explain what had gone on. But before he could even speak, they had already beaten him to a pulp. Time flew to December 1st, and Yuyuko was explaining to Takeru the conditions for returning to his original world. Her machine would work by reverting Takeru to the state before those around him had recognized his existence, thereby enabling him to travel between worlds. Until the experiment succeeded, Takeru's instability would persist. During that time, the responsibility of anchoring his existence fell to Kasumi. Takeru stepped into the machine to begin his journey through time. When the device activated, it did indeed transport him back to the original world, right in front of Sumika, in an incredibly awkward situation. He was so overjoyed he nearly cried, but Sumika punched him and sent him hurtling back to the other world. Although he had made it back to the original world, Takeru could not interact with anything there. It seemed that his physical materialization had not been fully achieved. While Takeru was still floating on a wave of happiness, Kasumi collapsed to the floor from sheer exhaustion. Takeru carried Kasumi back to her room to rest. He felt guilty for having put her through so much suffering without even realizing it. Meanwhile, Yuyuko continued to pour every ounce of her energy into improving her device. The next day, the three of them resumed the experiment. This time, Takeru was determined to succeed in order to save this world. Yuyuko handed Takeru a stack of documents to deliver to her counterpart in the original world, along with an explanation of the situation. She could not intervene any further, as doing so would throw the original world into chaos as well. Takeru had to avoid contact with everyone except Yuyuko. Because the power required for the travel machine was enormous, the entire base suffered a blackout. Yuyuko was counting on Takeru to retrieve the formula so that Unit Zizo could be completed. Takeru focused his mind, thinking of his friends, of his school, and of Sumika. in order to cross over to the original world once more. This time, he successfully arrived at the tree outside the city. He was so happy he burst into tears, but then he remembered that now was not the time for sentiment. He had to find Yuyuko immediately, or everything would be for nothing. He found Yuyuko and told her everything. He expected she would not believe such an absurd story, but she took the stack of documents he handed her and smiled with pure joy, because the theory of quantum causality she had been researching had been proven correct. By his subjective reckoning, it had been 3 years since Takeru last set foot in the original world. If he wanted to see his friends again, he would need to hold on to an unshakable will and seize what he desired with all his might. For Takeru was now an existence capable of reshaping the world through sheer willpower. From this point on, how the world would unfold depended entirely on his will and his actions. He had to fully grasp the weight and responsibility he carried. Yuyuko promised Takeru she would need 3 days to write out the formula he needed. She was happy to have taught such a brilliant student, and she very much wanted Marimo to see him too. An existence that transcended the laws of the world. With nothing to do but wait, Takeru strolled around the city, taking in the peaceful scenery of a world untouched by the beta. He unexpectedly ran into Mikoto from the original world, who invited him to play Valgernon. Before he could even agree, Mikoto had already dragged him along. After returning, he bumped into Sumika. She would be coming over to his house tonight to cook dinner. Noticing his unusual demeanor, Sumika thought he had a fever. But Takeru left Sumika behind and returned to the future world. Kasumi fainted again from exhaustion. Yet there was no other way, for Kasumi's existence was irreplaceable in completing Alternative 4. Yuyuko decided to tell Takeru more about Alternative 4. Originally, the plan's objective was to find a means of communicating with the beta. In 1958, extraterrestrial life forms discovered on Mars were determined to possess interplanetary travel technology. Humanity assembled zoologists, linguists, mathematicians, and cryptanalysis teams from intelligence agencies across nations to attempt to construct a method of communication. But forget about deciphering their language. Whether they even had a language at all remained a complete mystery. And so the plan was simply abandoned. In 1967, the Sacrobosco incident occurred when a lunar survey mission encountered the beta. Alternative 2 was launched in 1968, aiming to capture beta specimens and study their ecosystem to discover a means of communication. The investigation revealed that they possessed extreme hostility along with extraordinary adaptive capabilities, while organs such as digestive systems or reproductive parts could not be identified. These absurd creatures had somehow formed a society with advanced scientific and technological sophistication, then invaded Earth and struck terror into the hearts of all humanity. In 1973, the beta began their invasion of Earth after landing at Kashgar. Alternative 3 was launched with the objective of reading beta thought patterns. The Soviet Academy of Sciences conducted research to create artificial recognition-type espers based on biological specimens. The Soviets arranged for recognition-type espers of the same group to intermarry, producing offspring with enhanced recognition abilities. From among them, individuals with the highest recognition traits were selected and mass-bred to strengthen the genes. Kasumi was a human being created through this very process. The ability to perceive thoughts as images and emotions as colors was known as reading. Recognition-type esper individuals would then translate these into words. This reading ability could not function accurately unless the user was within a certain proximity to the target. A great many recognition-type individuals were sent on missions to infiltrate the cores of hives. The survival rate for those who returned was 6%. The successful readings proved that the beta did indeed possess thought. The only thing they were able to understand was that humanity was not regarded as a life form. Before Kasumi could be deployed, Alternative 3 was cancelled. The fourth plan was set into motion. It involved converting one's own thoughts and emotions into images and transmitting them. Using this projection-like ability, they continuously sent messages of peace to the beta, but there was absolutely no response. The objective of Alternative 4 was to complete the Zerzan unit so that humanity could win this war. When Takeru first arrived here, it was thanks to Kasumi that he was trusted. Kasumi possessed an extraordinary ability to hold an image firmly in her mind. For this experiment, she was therefore irreplaceable. If Kasumi were to lose her mental lock on Takeru, he would never be able to return to this world again. However, continuously maintaining a mental image consumed an enormous amount of psychic energy, which was why the mental bond between the two needed to be strengthened, and that was why they had to live together. While Takeru was away, Kasumi had been drawing pictures of him non-stop. The sketches were rather crude but endearing. For Kasumi, this was the best way to maintain his image in her mind, so she had done it to keep from losing track of Takeru. Just as Takeru was saying his thanks, Kasumi woke up and shyly ran off. Yuyuko gave Takeru one day to rest and ordered him to go after Kasumi. He ran back to the room, but Kasumi was not there. Takeru sat on the bed, questions swirling in his heart that he wanted to ask Kasumi. The moment when the images of Kasumi and Sumika had overlapped was surely no coincidence. Takeru had remembered things about Sumika. If Kasumi could preserve even the memories he himself had forgotten, then he wanted to tell her about what had happened in the original world and the previous world. On the government side, tensions were running extremely high. They decided to forcibly evacuate civilians to further their grand agenda. After Kasumi returned, Takeru did not say much to her since she could already read his thoughts. Takeru took her out to eat as a way of making amends. Even the cook noticed how often they were together and how close they seemed. The cook suggested they go up to the rooftop to enjoy the view. Takeru then recalled that Kasumi had once mentioned she had never seen the ocean, so he decided to take her up to the rooftop to feel the breeze. They played jump rope together and had a wonderful time. Takeru also asked with concern about Kasumi's health. He even pointed out the distant stretch of sea to her. Although he very much wanted to take Kasumi to the ocean, because she was classified as top secret, Takeru could only promise that when peace came, they would go to the sea together. Takeru sat down beneath a tree and shared the thoughts weighing on his heart with Kasumi. He feared that each time he traveled between worlds, his memories would scatter further. So he had to focus his efforts on turning his wish into reality. That wish was to save this world and then return to the original one. The military had carried out the forced evacuation of civilians. Riots broke out. The city issued a DEFCON 2 alert, and all armed combat units stood ready awaiting orders. At that moment, the Central Command Operations Room received a report. The coup forces had seized the Prime Minister's residence and the Assembly Hall, and even the power generation and water treatment facilities had been occupied. The First Fleet had also been deployed in Sagami Bay. Although the Imperial Army had fiercely locked down this information, the United Nations personnel were still able to uncover it. Sakin revealed that the backbone of the coup was the Imperial Capital Defense Force, which had managed to seize control of nearly the entire Imperial capital in a short span of time. Sakin had come here today with his own agenda, and he would stop at nothing. Whether it was someone carrying the bloodline of the shogun's family or his own flesh and blood daughter, he was willing to sacrifice them to achieve his ends. Naturally, he had already meticulously calculated both the methods and the timing. Beside the one who bore the shogun's bloodline stood the daughter of the United Nations Under-Secretary, the daughter of the Prime Minister of the Cabinet, the daughter of a former Army Lieutenant General, and the daughter of the head of the 2nd Diplomatic Division of the Ministry of Information. That they had all been gathered together in Squad 207 was no coincidence whatsoever. Captain Sajiri Naoya broadcast live, exposing the hidden misdeeds of the Empire. The disaster relief operation notice from the other day had been written with beautiful, eloquent words. However, any civilians who refused to relocate were ambushed in their sleep with tranquilizer guns and hauled off to concentration refugee camps. This was the truth behind the relief operations. The campaigns were numerous, yet they had turned a blind eye to the very people they were supposed to protect. Those treacherous, disloyal retainers had concealed the truth from Her Highness. If things continued like this, Japan would collapse. Squad 207 quickly assembled. Marimo informed everyone that the majority of the imperial capital had been seized by the coup forces, and the Ministry of Defense had fallen. According to the provisional government, the coup forces had assassinated Prime Minister Sakaki Korchika along with numerous cabinet members. Captain Naoya had personally killed the Prime Minister and the cabinet members under his authority. Despite her best efforts, Chizuru could not hold back her tears upon hearing that her father had died. The Under-Secretary wanted the United Nations military to intervene in the coup. The United Nations had no desire to see Japan fall into instability. At the same time Sato Island fell, the United States had withdrawn from the US-Japan Security Treaty, transferring its obligations and rights to the Greater East Asian Alliance. This had not gone through proper procedures. The United States was waiting for an opportunity to act on its own accord. Yuyuko also voiced her opinion. If the United States wanted to avoid turning the homeland into a battlefield, they could simply use G-bombs to blow up everywhere except their own territory. Yuyuko was certain that neither the launch of Alternative 5 nor unilateral American action would be permitted. From beginning to end, Sakin merely stood and listened, then left to attend to his own affairs. Everyone in Squad 207 was deeply worried about Chizuru, but as squad leader, she remained determined not to withdraw from this operation. The United Nations Security Council had decided to incorporate the US 7th Fleet, and accordingly Yokohama base would begin receiving American forces. Yuyuko had not expected the Security Council to reach consensus so quickly. Takeru had no memories of this event either. Yuyuko found the current situation very favorable for them. While everyone was inspecting the tactical surface fighters, Mickey came running in a panic to report that the Imperial Army was surrounding the base. Although this was a United Nations military base, it was still stationed within another nation's territory without permission. In terms of national sovereignty, such a response was only natural. Mana's group appeared once again, this time with the mission of protecting Maya. But Maya refused to accept this. At this point, the coup forces had turned their backs on the imperial capital, so their guns would not be aimed at Her Highness. The Imperial Army forces involved this time were reportedly pulled from the Absolute Defense Line and Defense Line No. 2. Takeru thought now was not the time to worry about national sovereignty, because if humanity had no future, none of that would matter. Fortunately, up to this point there had been no civilian casualties. The coup forces would certainly obey a direct order from Her Highness, but an immediate direct order could not be issued, and the longer time dragged on, the more the Imperial Army would consolidate its position. There was also the risk that the American military would enter the fray, as a precaution against the Imperial capital becoming a battlefield. All Royal Guard units stationed throughout the capital region were being rallied to the Imperial Palace. Kei stood alone on the rooftop, holding several letters. Takeru chose to trust her and walked over. Kei handed the letter she was holding to Takeru, but he could not understand its contents. Kei slowly explained that Tsushima Shuji was in fact Sajiri Naoya, the leader of the coup. The letters also mentioned a name, Ayamin Shukaku, who was Kei's father. Naoya had once served under her father. When the tragedy at the Gwangju campaign occurred, Kei's father, an army lieutenant general, was charged with desertion and thrown into prison. Recently, soldiers of the Greater East Asian Alliance who had been saved by Kei's father had passed letters along to her. They said her father had done nothing wrong. He had simply prioritized protecting and helping civilians evacuate. The people must do everything they can for their country, and likewise the country must do everything it can for its people. Those were the words Kei's father always spoke, and yet Kei did not know which side was right. Kei decided she would not read such letters that stirred up regret, but upon reading them she realized that the people who had been killed should never have had to die. Takeru decided to help Kei keep this secret. That evening, the United Nations military received an official request for military assistance from the provisional government in Sendai. Units at the base were also preparing to deploy. Squad 207 would be responsible for guarding Togashima Castle. The operational zone would be an arc along the southeastern shore of Lake Ashi in Hakone, situated right between the imperial capital and the base. The two military forces came face to face on opposite sides of the Ashi River. While Squad 207 was still en route, they received word that fighting had broken out in the imperial capital. A portion of the infantry besieging the imperial palace had opened fire on the Royal Guard. The 2nd Royal Guard Regiment immediately engaged in battle. Although Captain Naoya had issued a ceasefire order, the chaotic situation continued to unfold. The 1st Tactical Surface Fighter Company, dispatched as the vanguard, together with the S-117th Tactical Surface Fighter Company, carried out an amphibious assault on Shinagawa Port. Morimo ordered all stationary units to activate their communication devices. Immediately upon arrival, they split up to guard the designated positions. They maintained their watch from the pouring rain all the way through the falling snow. Takeru connected to Maya's channel, wanting to speak with her. He thought she would probably understand the coup faction's reasoning, since the announcement by the captain echoed what she herself had said. Indeed, Maya understood their sentiments, at a time when so many lives were being lost. What kept the Japanese people from succumbing to despair was that their hearts held their homeland dear, and that there were people who would share its fate. Yet the government and the military were gradually losing sight of what they were meant to be. Those who thought only of their own power and interests were gnawing away at this country. Striving to save the nation and its people from that state was precisely the mindset of the coup forces. Takeru had always believed that if humanity failed, everything would end. He assumed Maya was torn between her loyalty to the shogun and the people being lumped together with the coup rebels. But Maya did not see it that way. She simply wanted to share in the suffering of those who were enduring such hardship. Maya even asked Takeru to forgive her for her weakness, because standing guard in one spot had made him terribly drowsy. Takeru wanted to step out of the tactical surface fighter for a moment and asked his teammates to cover his watch. He walked toward Togashima Palace and discovered two unarmed people in the forest. He drew his weapon and ordered them to halt, but when the two turned around, he was startled to see that one of them looked exactly like Maya. Saken also appeared unexpectedly. The one who looked identical to Maya was Kubuin Yuyuhi, the acting Grand Shogun and Her Highness who held full executive authority over the Empire of Japan. At this point, the coup forces had just discovered that Yuyuhi had left the imperial capital. They immediately dispatched troops to pursue her before the other factions could act. Saken was the one who had leaked the news of Yuyuhi's escape. If the coup forces gave chase, the Imperial Army, the Royal Guard, and the United Nations military would all pursue them in turn. The fighting in the imperial capital would also come to an end. Yuyuhi had volunteered herself as bait. Earlier, Yuyuhi had ordered a complete ceasefire across all forces, but it had no effect. The coup soldiers had risen out of frustration with the current state of affairs. Among them were those who wanted Japan to descend into civil war at any cost. Saken entrusted Takeru with the mission of delivering Yuyuhi to Yokohama base. Since he could transport Yuyuhi by tactical surface fighter, there was likely no safer place in the current situation. After delegating the task, Saken departed. Before he left, Yuyuhi wished him well, for she did not want to hear of losing yet another official. Saken believed that even though Japan may have strayed from its path, it was not yet beyond saving. If this time they could cut away the rot, Japan would awaken once more. Yuyuhi could only place her trust in Saken. Takeru worried that American forces were also stationed at Yokohama base. That was precisely why Saken had to make this trip. Only then did Takeru realize that the reason they had been deployed here was not because the assignment was of low importance. On the contrary, it was of the highest priority. The curtain of the grand stage had been raised, and Yuyuko immediately ordered Isumi's team not to let those people set foot on it. Command also contacted all of Squad 207 to explain the situation. The enemy was splitting into multiple directions to pursue them. They were boxed in on both flanks and from behind. If predictions held, the S-108th Tactical Surface Fighter Company would rendezvous with them en route and launch a diversionary attack against the enemy units. The old Hikawa toll station would be the critical point. If they could pass through it before the enemy, the operation would be a success. The 19th Independent Royal Guard Squad would serve as the rear guard. Squad 207 was to advance westward, rendezvous with the 11th Fleet, and return to Yokohama base. In this operation, they could not count on artillery or air support whatsoever. The operation's top priority was to deliver Yuyuhi safely to Yokohama base. Tactical Surface Fighter Squad 207. All units, move out. With unwavering faith in their objective, Takeru charged forward without a moment's hesitation. The Imperial Army was closing in fast from behind. Takeru could not accelerate because he feared for Yuyuhi's safety, but Yuyuhi firmly ordered him to increase speed. Unable to disobey, he immediately called the entire team and announced the next leg would use boost jump as a shortcut. The ride was violently turbulent, and multiple machines were closing in on their position. The entire team was authorized to use their weapons at their own discretion and engage as the situation demanded, with the highest priority being the protection of Takeru's tactical surface fighter. But under no circumstances were they to fire first. The enemy side suddenly transmitted a message claiming they had no intention of attacking and demanded everyone halt immediately. At that moment, the US 66th Army Tactical Surface Fighter Company also arrived as reinforcements. They pushed forward at maximum speed to escort Yuyuhi back to the base. The coup forces also demanded that the American machines immediately cease their hostile actions. The US military requested that the enemy use the official international language to communicate, but they used that very language to hurl insults at the American forces. The coup forces had fired first, so the US military no longer had any reason to hold back. Both sides plunged into fierce combat. All enemy fighters at this location were downed. The Americans, aware that the enemy was currently surrounding their allies, decided to strike at the flanks and cut them off. Though Yuyuhi appeared frail on the outside, she was in fact the supreme commander of the military, having once piloted a tactical surface fighter for 96 consecutive hours, and she even had her own custom machine. While Yuyuhi and Takeru were talking, they were interrupted. The commander of the S-66th Tactical Surface Fighter Company, Major Walken, was calling in. Currently, Alpha Platoon was buying time, but the situation remained far from optimistic. They wanted to establish a resupply point at Kameishi Pass and link up with Squad 207. At this moment, the American soldiers were risking their very lives to protect them, so there was no time to waste. During the resupply, Yuyuhi asked Takeru why she did not see the Takemikazuchi. Takeru answered honestly that Maya had said she did not want to be treated differently and so had chosen not to use it. Yuyuhi smiled, but a shadow of sadness seemed to pass through her heart, for Maya had never truly accepted a gift from Yuyuhi. According to Maya, she was merely a distant relative of the shogun's family. Yet Maya and Yuyuhi looked exactly alike. It was then that Yuyuhi revealed a secret to Takeru. They were twins. Yuyuhi asked Takeru to deliver something to Maya, a keepsake that proved they had once been together. It was the only personal possession Yuyuhi could carry with her. They both bore duties they had to shoulder, so they could not acknowledge each other publicly and could only rely on Takeru. At that moment, the enemy had crossed Yamabushi Pass. Tactical Surface Fighter Squad 207 would fall under Major Walken's command and depart immediately. The Americans would reinforce protection on both flanks and the rear. Takeru noticed that Yuyuhi's condition had deteriorated, but she would not allow him to slow down. For the moment their speed dropped, many people would die, and Yuyuhi would never permit that to happen. The enemy had by now reached the toll station and was engaged in combat with the 174th Tactical Surface Fighter Company. They gave no thought to whether their side might change course and were pursuing at maximum speed. In a flash, Takeru suspected that the operations intelligence had been leaked. The Americans would use maximum speed to break through. Once they cleared Hikawa, the enemy would be powerless to stop them. The top priority now was to keep Yuyuhi from falling into the hands of the rebels. This was essential for the future of humanity. Everyone was wound tight as a bowstring. The enemy had arrived at the toll station, but because Yuyuhi was with their side, they could not act recklessly. Takeru worried that the enemy's true objective was not to bring Yuyuhi back, but to let something happen to her and pin the blame on the American military. Walken commanded his forces to form an encirclement and engage the enemy. The number of enemies swelled abnormally. Takeru did not know if he could make it through this battle line. But there was no turning back now. The only way was forward. Squad 207 shot across the sky like an arrow, successfully clearing the toll station. Transit successful. The rebel forces could no longer cut them off. Now they only needed to pass the Fujimidai ruins. From there they would fly low through the valley, which would ease the strain on Yuyuhi. But by then, Yuyuhi had already lost consciousness. Despite receiving reinforcements, the coup forces still could not intercept Yuyuhi. Their first squad was even completely wiped out. Komaki Sayoko then personally took to the field. Tsukuji never imagined that the first real combat test of the new OS would be against fellow humans. Tauko reminded Tsukuji that now was the time to focus on the mission. Overwhelming force was the only way to keep casualties to a minimum. They were the blades that shielded humanity. So if anything stood in the way, be it beta or human, it had to be eliminated. Sayoko was leading a contingent charging forward, intent on seizing this position so she could send reinforcements southward. Izumi commanded her squadron into battle on this side. Naoya was doing his best to rally his soldiers' morale to continue carrying out his plan. Yuyuhi's motion sickness had worsened. She had not yet vomited, but even a single episode could trigger difficulty breathing and dehydration. Since the outbreak of the conflict, Yuyuhi had not slept once, so her body was already in poor condition. They needed to minimize tactical surface fighter movement to allow Yuyuhi to recover. Takeru found his thoughts drifting to Meiya and what Yuyuhi had told him. The Kubuin family had a long-standing tradition of regarding the younger twin as an unwanted child. Because of this, Maya was taken from the family the moment she was born and given to a distant branch, the Mitsurugi family, as an adopted daughter, cast out of the family and forbidden from speaking of her true identity. Yet when trouble arose, she was expected to serve as Yuyuhi's body double. Meiya had been taught this since childhood. Simply because she was Yuyuhi's younger sister, even her placement in Squad 207 had become a political tool. Maya's presence at Yokohama base served as proof of Japan's trust in the United Nations. To put it bluntly, she was essentially a hostage. Yet Maya harbored no resentment toward Yuyuhi, for she felt she understood Yuyuhi's pain better than anyone. When watching the news about Mount Tenjin, Maya had been furious. Yuyuhi had once again risked her own life for the sake of the people. It proved they shared the same heart. At that moment, Waken's orders cut through Takeru's train of thought. Waken decided to administer a dose of sedative to Yuyuhi and continue moving. Sayoko did not pursue Isumi's group, but instead aimed to break through from the left flank and sweep them away. Isumi was equally vigilant, commanding her squadron to use their mobility to disrupt the enemy, looping around to encircle them. The tactical surface fighter's agility threw the enemy into disarray. In a moment of overconfidence, Mocha was struck down by a single blow from Sayoko. This in turn bolstered the morale of Sayoko's troops. Mitsuki charged forward alone in a rage, seeking to avenge her fallen comrade. Isumi could not stand idle either and rushed in to face Sayoko head-on. Meanwhile, Takeru still hesitated to administer the medication to Yuyuhi. Although he had been trained in using high-dose triazolam as the standard treatment for severe motion sickness, the procedure also carried risks of muscle relaxation, respiratory difficulty, and in the worst case, cardiac arrest. Whether to administer it required careful assessment on a case-by-case basis. Mana spoke up to stop Takeru from giving Yuyuhi the medication, as it would be extremely dangerous given her current state. Waken objected, arguing that Mana was merely an observer in this operation, and her opinions held no authority. Waken believed the optimal choice was to leave the battlefield as quickly as possible. Waken and Mana erupted into a heated argument. Marimo also stepped in to persuade Waken that if anything happened to Yuyuhi, anti-American sentiment among the populace would only worsen. That outcome was not worth the risk and effort the American government had invested in this operation. Waken lashed out, calling Japan a foolish nation. At a time when humanity faced extinction, they still could not recognize that they were the weak point of the Far Eastern defense and instead threw themselves into a meaningless civil war, wasting combat strength and time. Waken refused to accept his subordinates falling just for the sake of this infantile country. Those soldiers should have been fighting the beta to protect humanity. Although Takeru understood full well that Waken's words were not wrong, he still could not bring himself to act. On Izumi's side, the situation was growing dire. The death of their comrade had shaken everyone's morale. Akane nearly lost her life, saved only by Izumi's timely intervention from a distance. Izumi shouted harshly, snapping them back to their senses. Everyone resolved to survive and return home together. On Takeru's side, he still could not make a decision. During the time they had stopped to rest, many allies had fallen, and Waken was desperate to return to base. Mana understood that after Japan's defeat in the war against the United States, the country had lost its pride, its politics had crumbled, and it had been left so wretched that foreign powers trampled over it at will. Nevertheless, the fact that American soldiers' lives were being endangered was because the US government wanted to restore its influence in Japan. Waken's complaints were nothing more than crocodile tears. Mana loudly told Waken's forces to go back to the North American continent where they would be safe. Marimo, speaking on behalf of the United Nations, warned Mana that her remarks were deliberately provocative and obstructive to the operation. Marimo's words only made the situation more tense. Izumi urged Sayoko to surrender so that no more blood would be spilled needlessly. But Sayoko branded Izumi a traitor and grew even more frenzied. Izumi's squadron completed their mission, eliminating all the enemies Sayoko had brought with her. After the long argument, Waken finally realized that Mana had been doing it all to buy time for Yuyuhi to rest. By now, Yuyuhi had regained consciousness and weakly asked Takeru to administer the injection. Yuyuhi did not want to waste time and let more lives slip away in vain. Sayoko had been gravely wounded but still refused to yield. She believed that what she was doing was purging the filth from this nation. At that very moment, aircraft from the coup forces flew over their position. They carried a large number of tactical surface fighters led by Naoya, blocking Takeru's group. Naoya demanded they hand over Yuyuhi and agree to a 60-minute ceasefire. If he received no response after that time, he would use every means at his disposal to resolve the situation. After consulting with Yuyuko, Paul accepted the ceasefire. Takeru then brought Yuyuhi out of the tactical surface fighter. He could not comprehend what the coup forces were trying to achieve, but he would not hesitate to prioritize the victory of all humanity. During the 60-minute ceasefire, everyone disembarked from their tactical surface fighters to rest. Mickey happened to meet Irma Thesleff, a first lieutenant in the American military. Bonding over their shared circumstances, the two quickly became friends. Mickey felt terrified that her father had dragged everyone else into this mess. Irma also wept quietly on her own, missing her father. Yuyuhi summoned Takeru to her, wanting to know why he had hesitated to use the triazolam. Takeru said nothing. Yuyuhi told Takeru that one day he would stand above others, and when that time came, there would be many decisions he would need to make. There would not always be a path that pleased everyone. Should he ever lose his way and come to a standstill, he would need the courage to look back at where he began. He must not deny the stains on his own hands, nor must he deny the responsibilities and burdens he carried. Having said her piece, Yuyuhi dismissed Takeru. But he did not leave. He stood in silence, thinking for a long time. He felt that although he was Japanese, he did not possess enough love for his country. Naoya had risen up because he wanted to change Japan. But there was something more important than all of that. All of humanity's combat strength should be directed toward defeating the Beta. Japan's future could be set aside for the time being. Right now, humanity needed to unite and defeat the Beta. None of the members of Squad 207 held an ordinary position. Each of them was indirectly and deeply connected to this nation. Through his interactions with them, Takeru could feel their hearts aching for the Japanese people. Even Yuyuhi was surprised by the backgrounds of the Squad 207 members and ordered Takeru to assemble everyone. Speaking as Japan's shogun, Yuyuhi acknowledged the sacrifices and losses of everyone present. She expressed her profound gratitude and respect for those who had risked their lives to help her and to serve the nation. Only Maya stayed away, but she still watched Yuyuhi from afar. The prolonged war against the Beta was wearing down the spirit of the nation. Yuyuhi recognized her own inexperience, yet she still wished to protect the people and protect this country. Those who had risen in rebellion had done so for no reason other than their overwhelming love for their nation. The coup forces had committed a grave crime by killing their own countrymen. That crime must be brought before the law and met with fitting punishment. Even so, their spirit deserved forgiveness. Yuyuhi felt that the one who should bear responsibility was herself. Because of her, the very defenders of humanity had been marked for death. Yuyuhi wished to personally go and persuade the rebels. She ordered Mana to bring the Takemikazuchi here. At that moment, Maya appeared and stopped Yuyuhi. Maya knelt on the ground and pleaded to take on the crucial task of persuading the coup forces. Maya feared that if anything happened to Yuyuhi, the empire would crumble, so she begged fervently for Yuyuhi to accept her offer. Throughout the entire exchange, Maya never once raised her face to look at Yuyuhi. In the end, Yuyuhi entrusted this mission to Maya. Wakan looked back at Maya kneeling on the ground. Mana called him over and presented a sound rationale. If they used a cadet as a body double, it would increase their chances of breaking through the encirclement. If the persuasion succeeded, all the better. Even if it failed, it could still draw the enemy's attention and make it easier for Yuyuhi to escape. If the double were captured, by the time the rebels realized it was a stand-in, Yuyuhi would have already reached Yokohama base. Regardless of which scenario played out, the odds of everyone returning safely would not change much. And even if the persuasion succeeded, the rebels would eventually face execution all the same. Takeru then requested permission to speak. He volunteered to accompany Maya. His reasoning was that Yuyuhi had been riding in his machine the entire time, so it had likely been marked. If Maya traveled with him, it would add credibility to the deception. At first, Takeru had dismissed this conflict as beneath his concern. But after learning the thoughts of everyone involved in the operation, he no longer knew what he should do. One thing he knew for certain was that he was Japanese. Every decision he made revolved around that conviction, and he would take responsibility for whatever came of it. His ultimate goal was the victory of humanity. Wakan seemed to understand his reasoning, but sending him alone would appear too unnatural. They would need to add Royal Guard escorts to make it convincing. And so the plan was set. Before they dispersed, Mana leaned in and whispered to Takeru, asking him to protect Maya. While Irma was looking at a photograph of her father, a sudden wave of pain washed over her, and she lost consciousness. 60 seconds before the ceasefire expired, Mana would negotiate with the rebels through an open channel. Naoya took the bait and came in person for face-to-face negotiations. Maya also stepped out to speak with him. She expressed regret at having to meet Naoya under such circumstances. She also felt ashamed for having driven his group to this point. She took all the blame upon herself and did not want anyone to shed blood on her behalf. Although Naoya understood everything Maya said, he still wished to report one matter, and Maya granted him permission. According to Naoya, this entire incident had been orchestrated to fulfill an American conspiracy. While it was true that the coup forces had fired the first shots, upon investigating the soldier who had opened fire, they discovered he was an agent of American intelligence. This was beyond anything Takeru's group had anticipated. Because the Americans desired to restore their influence in the Far East, they would protect Yuyuhi and pacify the conflict. To make Japan more receptive to accepting American forces, they had torn apart Yuyuhi's ceasefire order. It was the Sendai Provisional Government that had been pulling the strings behind the chaos in the imperial capital all along. Naoya did not deny his own crimes either. Maya wept as she challenged Naoya. If he truly cared so much about the nation, about the people, about Yuyuhi, then why had he drawn his sword against others? She rebuked him for knowing that the people were the foundation of the nation, yet still losing his way and slaying his own countrymen. Maya gradually guided Naoya toward ending this conflict and freeing the people from their anxiety. She now truly understood Naoya's heart, and this incident would serve as a wake-up call. Speaking in Yuyuhi's name, Maya swore to Naoya that she would do everything in her power to protect the people and this nation. In that moment, Maya and Yuyuhi seemed to merge into one. Every word she spoke was for the people and for the country. Naoya, too, was awakened by her words. It seemed as though everything was heading toward a good ending. But then Irma suddenly piloted her tactical surface fighter and launched an attack, her eyes utterly lifeless. No one could understand how the situation had taken such a turn. The number of enemies was growing rapidly. Takeru had to rush Maya toward the Shimoda area. Irma came to her senses at that moment, with no idea what had just happened to her. Everyone fought off the enemy while trying to regroup. When Mickey was cut off by enemy forces and could not advance, Irma arrived just in time to help her escape. But in doing so, Irma lost her life. The situation was deteriorating by the minute. Wakan captured a spy and wanted to bring him back to face justice. But Naoya, consumed with rage, killed the spy, costing them a crucial witness. Wakan and Naoya, each carrying different ideals, clashed in battle. Unfortunately, Wakan was defeated by Naoya, and Naoya himself predicted that he would soon follow Wakan. Naoya continued to pursue Takeru's tactical surface fighter, but was intercepted by Chizuru. Chizuru was no match for Naoya, however, and was taken down in a single strike. Kei appeared just in time to intervene, but this put her in grave danger as well. Just when everyone believed Kei was about to die, Mana blocked Naoya's attack. All forces received the order to retreat. Naoya and Mana charged at each other once more. Although Mana understood that Naoya's actions were a desperate attempt to set the nation right and were worthy of respect, the path he had chosen was one of heresy. Naoya knew this full well, yet he harbored no regrets. Mana could only play the role of executioner to see Naoya off on his final journey. Naoya regarded his own death as a mission that would lead to Japan's rebirth. Mana stood and sent Naoya off with the most solemn military honors. With their commander gone, the remaining coup forces ceased their attack. Naoya, after witnessing Shukaku's death with his own eyes, had resolved to use his own two hands to cut away the rot from this nation before the people lost their place to return to. Takeru suddenly flew toward the tactical surface fighter where Yuyuhi was seated. Since Maya and Yuyuhi could not speak to each other, this was the only way Takeru could help them be near one another. The rebel forces finally surrendered. In the aftermath, the Sendai Provisional Government declared the coup had ended. They had lost far too much, but the blood that was spilled had not been in vain. As the only Japanese person who knew of three worlds, Takeru resolved to devote everything he had to saving humanity. Yuyuhi ascended a raised platform and shared with everyone the lessons drawn from this battle. She did not forget to express her deepest gratitude to Takeru. Standing on the shore and watching Yuyuhi's vessel depart, Takeru handed Maya the item Yuyuhi had entrusted to him earlier. Maya clutched it to her chest, unable to hold back her tears. Takeru knew he should not disturb Maya at this moment, so he quietly walked away. Afterward, Mikoto was summoned to report to the 11th Military Police Headquarters. Mickey brought flowers and laid them before Irma's tactical surface fighter, vowing to visit Irma's homeland once peace arrived. Chizuru knelt before her father's grave and prayed. After reclaiming the political power she had lost, Yuyuhi delivered a deeply moving address to the entire Japanese nation. She called upon every citizen to overcome this hardship together, to remember those who had sacrificed themselves for the people and the country, and to carry on their unfulfilled wishes. In this hour, she needed the strength of every single person, united as one, to save humanity and this nation. Kei stood alone in the forest, tearing up the letters she had received, lost in thoughts of Naoya. Yuyuko and Saken reunited in her office. The harvest from this ordeal had exceeded their expectations, and next they would proceed with their plan. Following the events of December 12th, Squad 207 had become official soldiers. Yuyuko was also awaiting the birth of the specimen she had been nurturing all this time.